Hello and good day to all of you. I am here to go over the lesson 4 assessment review with you. So if you'll grab a paper and pen and you can stop the video as you wish, and we're going to go over what is on lesson 4 assessment. So let's start by just kind of talking the overall theme of this assessment, and that is, let's start with the Bill of Rights, and you need to know the first 10 amendments and what each amendment stands for, and to be able to recognize those. We'll be going over the different 10 amendments in a moment. You also need to know what federalism means and to be able to pick an example of it. And you need to know about checks and balances, know the First Amendment really well, but really know all 10. Let's see, be able to tell what it takes to amend the Constitution. You've done lessons on all of these things, so hopefully this will make sense. So let's get started. I want to start by talking about what it takes to amend the Constitution. Our forefathers on purpose made it difficult to happen, but not impossible. So why would we even want to amend the Constitution? And the answer is because of changing times and what the people want. Now, as you have looked at today's world, you know that if you watch the news at all or see things on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, that we have a very divided America. And so to get the states to agree on 3/4, it takes the states voting, the Texas, not just Texas, but the state legislatures to amend the Constitution. It would take 3/4 of all states. And I don't know really in these days how that would happen. The other way is to have 2/3 of Congress. And that would be almost impossible today as well. So here's what you remember. 2/3 of Congress. Remember, Congress is made up of, it's bicameral. It's made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. So 2/3 of them would have to vote and agree to amend the Constitution, add an amendment. And that's why it hasn't been done in so long. And then 3/4 of the state legislature. So there's two ways. Now, let's talk about the 10 amendments. I'm going to save Amendment 1 for last because it has 5 things that go with it. So let's start with Amendment 2, the right to bear arms, which means guns. You probably know that if you live in Texas. Number 3 seems weird to us, no quartering of troops. But it was very important to the forefathers because the British redcoats actually would take over a home and live in that home. And it's hard for us to imagine that today because we don't have wars going on our land. But that is in the Constitution, so it was very important. Number 4, no unreasonable search and seizures. So if you get stopped for speeding in a car, the policeman can't just look in your trunk. He or she has to have a reason to do that. And, or reason, like if you get stopped and they think you are driving while intoxicated, one of the things that they could look at if they see in your car is if there's alcohol that has been opened, and that gives them a reasonable reason to search the car. Okay. 5 is the right to plead the fifth. And what that means is, and you've heard that probably on movies and TV shows, but what that means is you don't have to incriminate yourself. You don't have to testify against yourself. It sometimes seems weird, but that's one of our rights. Okay, so far, we've done the first 5, except for the first. I'm going back to the end. All right, number 6 is the right to a speedy trial. So let's say you're in jail and you're there for years and they won't do the trial. That is illegal according to our Constitution. Number 7, you have the right to a jury with your peers. That doesn't mean your best buddies. That means the people living in your area of the world. Those are your peers. Number 8, no excessive bail. So the bail is what you would pay to get out of jail before the trial. And it's got to be in line with your crime and not too excessive. Now, I have seen excessive bails in some cases when the accused is a flight risk, and perhaps they have a jet and they have lots of money, so they could fly off to Mexico. I've seen bails that were large for that reason. All right. So did you notice that 6, 7, and 8 all have to do with trials? So that was obviously very important to our forefathers. Number 9 is about the rights of people. I'm not going to go too much into number 9 right now. Number 10 is very important, and it's on this quiz. The purpose of it is on this quiz about 3 times. So, federalism. Powers not given to the federal government, federal is in Washington, D.C., powers not given to them will fall on the states. So the 50 states will handle the things that are not handled by the federal government. I hope that makes sense. All right, let's go to amendment number 1, the most well-known amendment. We have there's 5 things. 2 of them are very recognizable. Number 1, freedom of speech. This we hear more than probably any other thing. I have my First Amendment rights. I have the freedom of speech. Now, that doesn't mean you can say anything you want. You can't go into a movie theater and yell fire and cause a panic if there's no fire. So there are some stipulations to that. Amendment 1, the second thing, religion. We hear about that quite a bit. So free speech, religion. The other 3 are lesser known, but you need to know them. Assembly, the right to assemble people together. And those people don't need to be breaking the law. They just need to be meeting and assembling. So you could call a meeting for people who believe in vaccinations. Have that at your house. You can also do that if you want to grab people who don't believe in vaccinations. You can do all of that. Number 4 is the freedom of the press. Now, that is like if you ever watch a press conference with the president, the press are the people asking the questions. They have freedoms. There's a reason why this is in the Constitution. We are able to hear the answers to the questions they ask. The 5th one is petition. And there's 2 things that I want you to know about that. All of you probably are thinking, yeah, I'm going to sign the petition that we get to have candy at school. I'm going to sign that petition. Your parents may have signed a petition because they want the speed limit lowered on your neighborhood street. Okay, but there's also another meaning to petition, and that's a verb. I will petition my congressman or congresswoman. So petition means I can call them, I can type a letter to them, I can maybe post something on their social media, and that's petitioning. So I might say, Congressman Harmon, I really want you to think about the following before you vote on Tuesday's Proposition 5 vote. and then I would give my reasons. Does that help? We don't know, but we have the right to do that. So let's go over the 5 again. Speech, freedom of religion, assembly, freedom of press, and lastly, freedom to petition. So those are those. All right, now let's keep going. All right, the 10th Amendment. I'm going to read this to you. So here's what it says. The powers not delegated to the U.S. Constitution, nor prohibited in the states, are reserved to the states respectful of the people. Now, that is the 10th Amendment. So whatever isn't captured up in the federal will fall down to the states. And that is called federalism. Don't get this mixed up with federalist and anti-federalist. This is different. It's called federalism. Whatever doesn't happen up here in the federal government, it happens in the states. Federalism. Okay? That doesn't mean separation of power. If you talk about separation of power, you're talking about the 3 columns, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, next. You might be given several choices, and you have to pick the one that goes with the First Amendment. So we've talked about that at length. Checks and balances. This is with the 3 columns. We have the legislative, we have the executive, we have the judicial. They're all equal, and they are separated by power. Separate power so that no one's more great than the other. But they also have checks and balances. So I want you to be able to pick out this as a check and balance, okay? Congress passes a law. It goes to the president's desk for signature. But instead of signing it, the president vetoes it, X's it out. What can happen then? It can go back to the Congress and actually hang on just a second. And Congress can override that vote with a 2/3 vote. So that is called checks and balances. They're checking on each other, and it's a balance of power. Okay, there's many more checks and balances. That's an example of one. Okay, I want you to see this Venn diagram. And this, I love Venn diagrams because I used to be a math teacher before history. Now, this, I'm writing some things on here. This is an example of the word federalism. Whatever the federal government does is here. What they both do is in the middle, and then what states can do is here. So this is an example of federalism. Remember my circle ago? I did it up and down instead of sideways. Whatever the federal government doesn't handle, the states do. So I'm going to write some things in here to show you an example. And then we're going to go over this. Alrighty. So pretend like I'm writing on my chalkboard behind me. So let's go over this. All right. The federal government, I hope this shows up. I don't know if it's going to show up. I'm going to change this right quick if you don't mind. Oh, it won't let me. Okay. Well, anyway. All right. So the federal government is the only one who can declare war. Right here. States cannot declare war. The states handle public education. So in the state of Texas, they handle the STAR test. They handle the state of Texas education. But in the middle, what they both do is they both collect taxes. So let's talk about that. The federal government collects income tax off of the work that we do, and we have to pay taxes on April 15th every year. The state taxes us by taxing us with property, taxes if you own property in Texas, and if you, anything we buy in the state of Texas, they add a tax to it. Different states have different rules. In Texas, we do not have an income tax. All right, next, First Amendment, you need to know what it says. We went over that in long depth. All right, we've talked about checks and balances. Here is another example of checks and balances. If the president wants to write a treaty, now that sounds kind of weird. Why would we want to write a treaty? Usually this takes place after a war, but let's just pretend like our president is creating a treaty with another country. It has to be voted on and approved by 2/3 of the Senate. So that's a check and a balance. The president can declare war, can write a treaty after a war is over, but 2/3 of the Senate have to approve it. Checks and balances. Okay, you need to know that the U.S. Constitution contains several things. Let's think about this. Let's think about some of them. It has the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments. It has a law that says the U.S. Congress passes tax laws. What's another rule of the Constitution? Probably that the president is the only one who can declare war, or the Congress and the president. So you need to be able to pick those out. What is the purpose of the 10th Amendment? And remember what the 10th Amendment says. Powers not given to the federal government will be given to the states. That's an example of federalism. But you need to know that it also is there to limit the authority of the federal government. So what doesn't belong to the federal government belongs to the states. Why would our forefathers care about the federal government not being too big? Remember who was ruling them before the American Revolution? The King of Britain. And we did not want a king. We wanted a president and states' rights. We were trying to get away from the authority of a king. All right, I want to read you that just to make sure we've got everything that we need to understand on that concept. All right. This is the 10th Amendment. I'm going to read it exactly as it is written. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. So the short way of saying that is whatever the federal government says that's going to happen in the Constitution, whatever is not in the Constitution for the federal government will be taken on by the states. You need to know that that is to limit the power and authority of the federal government. It's also called federalism. Okay, let's keep going. I hope that this is making sense to you. All right. I've already said you need to know the amendments. Let's see. Like if I said you get the power to have a jury of your peers, you need to know that that goes with the 7th Amendment. So I don't know how you're going to memorize that, but you need to kind of know the difference in them. The 10th Amendment is federalism. Also, it keeps the authority of the federal government in check. We don't want them to have too much authority, but it also says whatever powers are not with the federal government will be with the state. All right. Ninth Amendment is rights of the people. Eighth Amendment, right to not have excessive bail. And Sixth Amendment, right to a speedy trial. They're going to be listed, and some of them are going to be blanks that you have to fill in. All right, next. What is popular sovereignty? Y'all did a vocabulary on that in your slideshow. Popular sovereignty just means who won the popular vote. So if I know growing up, we would have popular votes at school, like most talented, most beautiful, which is so ridiculous. But anyway, most likely to succeed. All of those things were by popular vote. And that's what you need to know that. Now, if I gave you a list of things and you had to tell me which one is by popular vote, I want to hear a yes or a no as you're watching this. Okay, let's go. First of all, the presidential election. Is that popular sovereignty? And the answer is no. The way the president gets elected is by the Electoral College, and every state has a certain number of electoral votes. Interesting, isn't it? What if I said Supreme Court judge? Supreme Court judge. No. The Supreme Court judges are chosen by the president. Then they have to get 2/3 approval by the Senate to become a Supreme Court justice. So that is not by popular vote. What about president of your let's say president of your game club? Yes. Those of you that are playing these games, if y'all all vote online, that would be popular vote. What about somebody running for Congress? Yes, because popular vote wins all other electoral races except for president. So yes. Senate, yes, popular vote. House, yes, popular vote. What about governor of your state? Yes, popular vote. What about mayor of your small town? Yes, popular vote. I hope that helped. All right, here we go. Let's see. The Constitution has 2 ways to propose an amendment. That's on there again. We've already talked about it. 2/3 of Congress, that means both the Senate and the House, or 3/4 of the state legislatures. All right. Now, if I said in the Magna Carta, y'all studied about this, but the Magna Carta was a law that kind of puts some limits on the king. And let's say that you see this on the quiz. Number 39 of the Magna Carta states, no man seized or imprisoned except by lawful judgment of his equals or law of the land. What does that remind us of? Judgment of his equals. That reminds us of jury of our peers, right? Or the law of the land. So the law, sometimes you don't have a jury in trial. Sometimes you just have the judge choosing. So, it can go either way. But do you know what this is called? There's another word for this besides the 7th Amendment. There's another word for this. It's called due process. And this is a word that you need to really know. We should have due process where we have a jury of our peers or the law of the land. And we are entitled to life, liberty, and property and due process. Now, let me give you another example of due process. Let's say you are all in my class, which you are, but let's say I have you and I see you face to face. And on one particular day, I think that one of you is cheating. So I pull you over to the side and take you out in the hall or whatever. And I say, I really think that you are cheating. And I'm going to give you a 0 on this test. What should a teacher always do? Anybody? A teacher should always listen to the student and allow them due process. Allow them to state their side of the story. And due process needs to be in everything we do. So a person accused should get due process and be able to explain, even if it's a civil discourse and this company is suing this company and you're in trial and you have a jury of your peers. Each side should have due process to state their opinion, not their opinion, but the evidence. If you ever watch any TV shows that have a jury going on, a trial, or even news shows, and they'll give the one side and you're like, oh man, I know he's guilty. Then they cut to commercial and then they tell the other side and then you're like, oh man, now I'm not so sure. We've given due process to both sides. All right, let's move on. What does republicanism mean? Republicanism. It doesn't mean Republicans. It doesn't mean Republic or Democrat. It's republicanism. And we in the United States are a democratic republic. Democratic republic. So, here's what it means. Republicanism means that we need to look very closely, look very well at a person's qualifications and their character so that when we elect them and vote for them, they are placed in office with our trust. That's what republicanism means. It's not Republican and Democrat. It's talking about as we vote. Republicanism means we look at the character and the qualifications of the person, and then we vote. And then because we've looked at all of that, we trust them in office. That's what republicanism is. All right, separations of power. I have down that I want to read this. So hang on just a minute. Oh no, I hope it doesn't die before we finish. If it does, I'm going to be upset with myself. All right, here's an opinion. And this guy was a delegate to the Constitutional Convention in 1787. And it's Edmund Randolph. It is the opinion of this committee that a national government ought to be established consisting of a supreme legislature, a judiciary, and an executive. What are those 3 things? They're the 3 pillars, the 3 columns. They're also separation of powers. There should be no powers greater than the other. So look for those answers. All right. Why is it important that we can change the Constitution? I think I talked about this earlier, but times change and we need to assess it and change it according to the values of the people. It's been a long time since we've changed it. I think the last change oh man, I should know this, the 27th Amendment. I think it's that 18-year-olds can vote. I need to check on that. Okay, 17. I want to read 17, and this is an example of freedom of the press. Here we go. In an earlier year, John would face charges for printing a journal that was critical of the royal governor of New York. This is before we were our own country. At the trial, the jury found him not guilty. So which Bill of Rights addressed this? Freedom of the press. Because he put it in his newspaper and printed it. He had to go to trial because he had criticized the royal governor. All right, next. Okay, the Third Amendment is about quartering of soldiers. And I've talked about that already, but another way of saying that is forced sheltering of British troops. And I'm watching a show right now on Netflix where they are... the British, it's during the American Revolution, and British forces are living with the colonists. And so it really makes it come true. That show is called Turn. It's about to be off of Netflix, and I need to warn you that there are there's a lot of PG-13 things, so you may not want to watch that. Okay, let's see. The Fourth Amendment, you need to know, unreasonable search and seizure. They've got to have probable cause to search your car. They've got to also, the warrant to search your house or your car or whatever, or your office, has to be very explicit of what they're looking for, and a judge has to sign that. So... and then lastly, I want to read this statement about due process. I've kind of talked about that a lot, but let me read this. No free man shall be seized or imprisoned or stripped of his rights or possessions or outlawed or exiled or deprived of his standing in any other way, nor will we proceed with force against him or send others to do so, except by the lawful judgment of his equals or by the law of the land. That I've talked about this already in another one, but that was actually from the Magna Carta. We address that in our Constitution as well, and it's called due process. Yay! And we are finished. This may be the longest video I've made. I'm not sure, but I hope you do well. You might want to watch this 2 times. Take notes. Know your 10 amendments, and wish you the best.